Welcome, everybody, to episode 3 of our Good Life U series. And this week, we're going to be talking about the 5 faucet theory. This is a continuation in this series, and in our second episode, we talked about wonky schedules. And if you haven't watched or listened to that episode, our episodes are kind of going to build on each other. So I'd recommend you go back and watch the second episode, and in there you'll see me lead that episode by saying maybe you should go watch the first one. So it's probably a good idea to go ahead and watch the first and the second one, but definitely get into that second one to set this one up. I think you'll be much happier and learn a little bit more about what we're trying to do. So we're excited about this. If you like our series, then share it, subscribe it, and you can get it anywhere you get podcasts. So we're excited about our viewership. There's getting to be a lot of traction with this, and we love the collaboration and the feedback I'm getting from the people that we work with. And all of our Good Life U partner agencies that we're actually working with in different parts of the country. Thank you for all the feedback we're getting from you too. You know, as you learn, wonky schedules from the last episode are crazy mixed up schedules that are sort of off balance. They're hard to fill, they're fractured, they're filled with part-time and full-time staff. They're, ironically, how they were created, as crazy as they actually end up being, they're perfectly explainable how they got there. But that doesn't mean that they're going to produce stable workforce. And the reality is, we talk very clearly that this has to be a win-win-win. It's got to be a win for, our DSP heroes that are working. They got to have an attractive schedule. It's got to be a win for the agency, so that the community provider who has to deliver care, and beyond all, it's got to be a win for people with people with disabilities who want increasingly individualized services and increasingly small settings. So we got to pull that all off, and we can do that. But the irony of wonky schedules is when you look at and develop them, you can explain them, but that doesn't mean they're something that you can actually deliver good care in. So anyway, that was the last episode. And we kind of ended by talking about, what do we want instead? And, real quickly, we really want full-time and not part-time schedules, because professional care is delivered by full-time employees that you can really put your effort into training. You want all these schedules to be equally appealable by the schedule or by pay. We talked about schedule migration. We don't want people running and moving from schedule to schedule as as turnover happens and they keep looking for something better. We want them to be equal. We want fewer different employees involved in care, and we want fewer transitions across a day for a client to experience. And we definitely want to cover all the care ratios efficiently. We want them standardized. And we want as many days off as possible, because the more days off you have, the more opportunities you have to work extra when you're needed. So it increases your capacity, and we'll get to that later. But more than anything, we want to make sure that when we actually are trying to recruit people from the public to work in our program, you want to have attractive schedules to recruit people with starting pay. And most of the time, that's not the case. We're actually having the unwanted schedules are the ones that we end up attracting people to work with at beginning pay, which causes all of the vacancies and the chronically open positions, and actually feeds into additional turnover and problems. So, we talked about what the problems were. We talked about what we wanted. And today what I'm going to do is dive a little deeper into the different types of schedules that are used at GoodLife as a comparison, and our partners, but we're going to kind of use GoodLife as an example, and talk a little bit about the challenges and the uses of these schedules. I'll tell you, we don't use one schedule, and nobody does use just one scheduling approach to deliver care, because you have to have schedules that are layered on top of each other in ways that will allow you to deliver the ratios of care that you need. And the care needs ebb and flow across time, and they are intermittent in many ways. And so you have to have schedules that can handle that. And that's often what produces all the problems with the schedules in the first place, how that is laid out. But at the same time, this is kind of what we're charged with. And so we have different standardized schedules that we layer on top of each other. Now, one of them that's that is most well known, I guess, the most used schedule across the country, and we use it too in very small moderation, is the 5-day work week. Usually, in our case, we have traditional day services in our program for some people. Generally, it's people who live with families at home or other providers who need traditional day services, and that's usually Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 or in that general range. And so that Monday through Friday schedule is used in some small way to provide consistency, in those traditional day service schedules. We do not use that method, though, for all of our traditional day services. We just use that to provide some stability across those 5 days. So we do use 5-day work schedules in a very limited way. The reason we don't use it more broadly is because a 5-day work schedule, generally that's something that would have 3 shifts across a 24-hour period, usually a 7 to 3, 3 to 11, and 11 to 7, or something like that. It produces the most part-time positions of any scheduling system. Because you're left with 2 days that are uncovered. And the only way around that would be to do either a rotating schedule or schedules of those 5 days in ways that give very unattractive days off. And if you work 5 days and you have very unattractive days off, that isn't very appealing, of course. The other thing about an 8-hour workday is when you really have no capacity to work extra. I mean, you only have 2 days off, and I think most people believe you have to have 2 days off for work-life balance, right? And so when you're asked to work extra, most people are like pulling, quote, double shifts. Well, 16 hours is a long day. And so they usually don't do it. What happens is they pick up, I can do 4 more hours, but that's all I can do. And so now you start fracturing schedules, and now you got to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to get somebody to come in from 8 p.m. until 11 tonight? How am I going to do that? The truth is you can't, or you often can't, and that means a manager has to backfill that. And so all of a sudden the managers are working extra, and so that's a problem. So, the 5-day work schedules are a problem for a lot of reasons. It produces part-time, unattractive days off, and, as you'll hear later, organically, before you give PTOs, they only have 104 days off a year, 2 days a week, right? Well, it requires the most PTOs of any scheduling system because if you have 104 days off, you have to give quite a few PTOs. Most of the people that I've worked with 5-day work weeks are giving 30 to 40 extra days off a year. That's a lot of days off a year, and it's a little bit of self-inflicted damage because by giving all that time off, you have to fill it, right? And so the 5-day work week is just a problem for so many reasons, and it probably singularly explains why we have 69% full-time and 31% part-time as an average in this country, which is not what you want to deliver professional services. So, we use it, but in very small moderations in what we do. That's one thing. Now, another one would be a part-time schedule. Normally, those are weekend positions. We use them in very small moderation, very few. In fact, I think we only have 4% part-time positions in our agency. Now, that's compared to 31% nationally. So we just use a fraction of part-time, and it's on weekends when we do it normally, but only when they're working with somebody who is full-time and experienced. The problem with part-time is 2 things. One, if somebody's working a part-time weekend, usually they're working someplace else full-time, or they're going to school, or they're doing something. Really, part-time positions rarely work extra because by definition they want part-time, and usually they're bolting that onto some other job somewhere, or they have other responsibilities, and that's what they can afford to do. So it's not a very good position to get extra capacity for an agency, and it's filled with risk because they're often working during times when there's no supervision present. I mean, if people are working weekends part-time, then the managers who are working are not usually working weekends. Oftentimes, I've seen in agencies they're working by themselves on the weekend. Some people call this weekend warriors. It sounds great, but it's delivering care that often is risky, and it has the most of all positions. It has the most vacancies. What that means is, when you have those vacancies, well, what happens? Well, you got to have 5-day work week people pick up 2 days, which is hard to do. Then you don't have any time off. Or you have managers doing it, and you're going to lose managers. And if you lose managers, you lose your direct support staff as well. So that's not a good option, but it is used in a targeted way in our agency, but never by themselves. So those are two types of schedules that everybody else knows about. Everybody uses those. But I'm going to talk to you about one that most people don't do. And this is really our go-to schedule. I'd say, about 40% or 45% of all of our schedules fall into this category. This is a 3-day, sometimes it's a 4-day work week, but mostly a 3-day work week. It's called the front, back, half work week. This is basically taking the week and dividing it in two. We call it the front half and the back half. The front half works Sunday and 2 days out of Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, or it works Saturday and 2 days out of Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So there's the front half and the back half of the work week. There's oftentimes a swing day. Some people will call that Wednesday. We do it in a couple of different ways, but if it's a swing day on a Wednesday, then sometimes either one or the other pick that up, or sometimes one claims it as part of their work week. And I'll go over another technique here in a little bit, but basically you work 3 days, and sometimes you pick up that fourth day, and sometimes you have an overlay staff that works the swing day across 3 homes, where one swing day is on a Tuesday, one swing day is on a Wednesday, and one swing day is on a Thursday, and we can go through details of how that would happen, but or show a schedule on how that would work. But that's kind of how the front back half. Now, a front half back half workforce works 12 or 13 hours a day. That's how it works. So they're working roughly 36 to 39 hours in a work week. Always one of them is on a weekend. It's either a Saturday, but here's the deal. So they're working 36 hours, 3 days, sometimes 4 days if they want to pick that swing day up. And we're going to talk about a compensation system that's designed to go with this on a later episode. But I want you to get the point. This is it's front half, back half, day and night. It covers 24 hours or it covers waking hours, depending on how you use it. We'll go into detail when you get into some scheduling techniques probably in the next episode. But I want you to understand it conceptually. The main issue on this is to recognize some of its benefits. You're working 36 to 39 hours across 3 or 4 days, generally 3 days. Now, that means you have 16 days off a month organically. That's 208 days a year. That's twice as many organic days off than you do in a 5-day work week, right? That's 104 days off. Now, let's pretend that you're really generous and you get 40 days of PTOs with that, right? So you get 104 days and 40 days of PTOs. That's 144 days off. Pretty generous, right? Well, except that in the front back half workforce, you start off with 208 days before you give a day of additional time. You get 16 days off a month. You fundamentally get as many days off or more off than what you're working. That's life balance. And the cool thing about that is that then you could actually work extra and still have 3 days off. So it's an incredibly good system from an employee's point of view. Now, the other thing is it also, so in addition to being lots of days off, you have more time to work extra and still have days off. You have better coverage on weekends because you're not looking at just part-time people working weekends. There's always a full-time team working on a Saturday, a full-time team working on a Sunday. Then when you put a part-time on top of that, it's livable because they're not working with other part-time people, right? There you have two teams, and it's a team approach. There's some symmetry about that. There's some consistency about that. And by the way, there's lower call-off rates associated with it. All of our research show that, because if they have 4 days off and you don't, we'll talk about this later, we don't give as many PTOs, and we'll get into that later. But when that happens, they don't call off as much. What they do is trade, and we'll get into the details of that later, but that's a really cool benefit. They have fewer trips to work. Think about that. I mean, they don't have to come to work as often. That means not as much child care. That means the transportation problems that often happen around people with lower incomes. All of those things are there. They have fewer people involved in care, fewer transitions across the day, and you're able to recruit staff who work from longer distances away from where your home is. That's a big deal. And the other thing about it is you're able to use some premium pay and other kinds of pay strategies that we're going to go into later. So, I want you just to kind of get the high level. This is a scheduling system that we use. We use it in combination with others, but it's probably our go-to, I call it our base scheduling system. So the base is this front back half system, day and night. You layer on top of that maybe a few extra part-times and a few Monday through Friday positions. And by the way, on another episode all by itself where we layer in, live by, and live with types of positions on this that can provide coverage that ebbs and flows to cover intermittent needs. So you look at all these combinations of staffing approaches and put it together, and what you have is you have a portfolio of positions that are standardized, that are used to put together the ratios that you need, and they all have a purpose. And that's how we approach the scheduling. And at the end of the day, what it means is they also have different rates of turnover, variety of other things, and stability. And collectively, they increase the stability of the program, fewer different people involved in care, and they really just deliver better care. So what I really kind of want you to take out of the episode today is that we have this approach to scheduling. And the approach to scheduling really tries to give people more of what they want. And what direct support staff want is they want more pay, and we'll get into that. These schedules actually produce about 10% or 15% more buying power for pay. But they also give all this other stuff that they want. Work-life balance, time off, and for the agency, it gives them the capacity to work extra and less reliance on part-time workforce. So it's sort of like trying to create that win-win-win arrangement. And you now have, at the end, you have these 5 faucets running. That's a faucet for all these different types of schedules that work and have a purpose, a very targeted purpose. And so you're recruiting to the public these different options that's going to appeal to different groups, and they're going to have a pipeline of greater number of employees coming into the agency. And because they're standardized, you don't actually have to wait until these positions are open in order to hire. That's going to be covered under another episode called Vacancy or Workforce Management, and how our superimposed staffing and our employee staffing choices work. And that's an incredible thing for HR, because they are not going to the public trying to fill positions that they can't fill, and they're not waiting for weeks to figure out really what position is available as people migrate across an agency. This is all designed to kind of work together. So this episode kind of gives you the big picture of the different approaches. Next episode, we're going to talk about how do we get organized in your agency to figure out what schedules we use in your homes and in your program, and then we're going to go into some details of how we get that done. Then we're going to talk about our pay strategies after that.